Before we plunge into the math of our course, I want to take just a couple minutes to give you an overview of the way I see what Math 90 is and what we're trying to accomplish in this course. So I call this my overview of Math 90 Pre-Calculus Algebra. So the course is separated into basically four separate parts. We will do an introduction on graphs and symmetry, so one section where we just sort of get our feet wet. And then we're going to plunge into part one, the fundamentals of functions. If there's one word that sums up what this course is all about, I would pick the word function. Understanding what a mathematical function is, how functions work, is the most critical idea that you need to carry on into calculus as you move forward in math. And so we're going to have emphasis on function notation, how we write down what functions are, on graphs. Graphs provide an enormous amount of information about functions. What composition of functions is. Composition is used a lot in calculus courses. And transformations. Transformations tell us a lot about how functions are related to each other. The second part of the course is on polynomial and rational functions, so particular kinds of functions that we're going to study in more detail. The third part covers exponential and logarithmic functions, again another class of functions. And in the fourth part we're going to study conic sections plus some odds and ends. Conic sections are famous curves that are not usually graphs of functions, but they're important for you to know as you move forward. And I won't go into the odds and ends. There are just a couple topics that we'll cover that don't fit into these other categories. There is no trigonometry in Math 90. So students at City College also take Math 95 trigonometry as a separate course. So one reason we call this pre-calculus algebra and not just pre-calculus is because it's the pre-calculus material that does not include trigonometry. So Math 95, that's a separate course, trigonometry. And then finally in this introduction, I just want to say a couple things about some critical components of the course. The first one is graphing. Graphing is something we're going to do all over the place, all the time. And while we'll be sketching a lot of graphs, meaning rough sketches, but still accuracy is important and drawing graphs with care is important. So please use graph paper. In fact, this sheet you see here is just a cheap sheet of graph paper. I have lots of basic graph paper of this type that I'll be writing on, and you should too. You should always draw your graphs on graph paper because that will just make it so much easier for you to do accurate work. Algebra. What is the algebra, pre-calculus algebra? If I had to sum that up, I mean, there's a lot of manipulation, a lot of simplifying, a lot of operations, but really the point is to learn to recognize equivalent forms. It's not so much like there's one official simplified answer anymore as you become a more advanced student. It's more important to recognize that there can be more than one correct way of writing a result, and you need to learn to recognize those different ways. And sometimes one equivalent form is more useful for one situation than another, and you need to know how to choose which one to use. And in parentheses, I also say learning to recognize when forms are not equivalent. It's kind of like knowing when you have the wrong answer, right? Next point is technology. I really suggest you use a graphing calculator app like Desmos. Desmos is an incredible app that can do all graphing calculator operations, and it's free. You can put it on your phone or on your tablet or on any device. Now, in this course, mastery by hand is still required. I'm sort of traditional, I'm sort of old-fashioned. I believe a lot in writing things out by hand. and also learning to work certain problems by hand without using a calculator. But when you do work on your own, it can be so informative to refer to a graph in Desmos. We may see a really complicated function that we would never graph by hand. And so graphing that in Desmos can really help your understanding. So we are going to refer to Desmos in this course, or for you, you can use whatever graphing calculator you're most comfortable with. And finally, applications. We will cover a certain amount of applications in this course, and we're going to focus on linear and quadratic models, and also exponential growth and decay. Exponential growth and decay, those are just excellent, real down-to-earth applications that show why we need all this gobbledygook that we're going to be learning about in this course. So there it is. There's the overview. I'm just going to slide back down to the contents section, and so in the next video we'll start doing some math.